I've had the privilege of traveling and living in different countries. This all began for me a long time ago, and maybe I'll get into that a little bit later. But the program we put together, my wife and I, you are the gatekeeper of your health, you decide. So the premise for this is that who is responsible, who's the architect for my health? I'm responsible, you're responsible. So each one of us have a responsibility to make sure that we're got the right information, right? Well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier before we started, that we've done this in numerous different countries and different languages, and so my mind was all, I don't have to prepare, I'm ready. But not Sunday morning. I was laying in bed, and a little voice says, we're going to do it differently this time. So it's going to be a little bit different format if you've ever been to one of my programs. But there's some similarities, some things new, and some things old. And hopefully we can all gains from this. Typically, when we go to a different country, I have a team of 8 doctors that will travel with me, and they're not here. I'll introduce one of them probably tomorrow, maybe this evening. Yeah, this evening I'll introduce one of them. But I'm very fortunate when I go, I have these doctors that travel with me, and oftentimes they stay behind after I leave. They're not here this evening, but we'll talk about it. Now, total health. When we talk about total health, this is a quote from W.W. Bauer, a former director of public health for the American Medical Association. And notice how he encompasses health, total health. Total health involves what? Spiritual. He put that first. Isn't that amazing? Emotional and social aspects of life as well as the physical. So he put the physical where? Last. Now that's an interesting concept, because the first ones that he identifies have to do with what? Our thinking, right? Now that's what came to me on Sunday morning. What is the cause of most disease? What do you think? Okay. Okay, and stress is usually, it can be on the body, but most often it's the stress on this organ up here, right? So, what is the cause of most disease? And I'm going to be, for those of you who do not know who Ellen White is, I am going to be using her quite a bit. I'm also, you'll see, I'm quoting a lot of medical journals as well as I go through this. But almost 50 years ago, when I was in Guatemala, living in Guatemala, I was a brand new Christian, and a missionary doctor gave me a book called Ministry of Healing. Now, that book has been around this world I don't know how many times, and I left it at home this trip. It's the first time I've ever left it at home. I could probably have my visas stamped in that book because it's been to so many countries, but I forgot it. And I know it's so underlined, there's nothing left that can be underlined, it seems like. But I'm going to be using that. And I came across this quote. It's not a direct quote, but it's a paraphrase. 9/10 of what? All disease originates or has its foundation where? In the mind. Now, did the author just grab this out of the air, or what? Have you ever heard of Charles Mayo? The Mayo Clinic. You know, it's fairly well known. And here's one of the brothers, Charles, said, well, it almost looks like, I don't know who's quoting who. 9/10 of disease is worry and fear. And you mentioned stress, right? And those things are in our mind. And how many people, my wife worries about things that I don't worry about, and I worry about things that, why are you worrying about this? God, it's really amazing how we kind of complement each other and remind ourselves that God has been taking care of us, and He will what? He will continue to take care of us. 9/10 of disease is worry and fear. On the other hand, the Bible says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Yes, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. So again, the Bible is in full agreement that our thinking has a lot to do with our health, more than we maybe give it credit for. As a man thinketh in his heart, how true that is. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So, you know, it really is a diagnosis of what's going on inside when we open our mouth. Is it healing or is it crushing? Now, here's where my program, well, actually my program's already changed, but I've jumped way ahead, and this is some old statistics. The statistics have not improved. And this is from an organization called cchr.org. 280,000 babies from 0 to 1 years old are prescribed mind-altering psychiatric drugs in this country. This is 2017. 198,000 children 0 to 5 years old are taking ADHD drugs. And those are powerful stimulants, right? Same class as cocaine, morphine, and opium. 10 million children are currently being prescribed psychiatric drugs. More than 1 million of them are under the age of 5. That is 2017. Today, the Psychiatric Association wants to have every child in America on some kind of psychotropic drug. That's their goal. And those obviously are affecting their thinking, correct? And when you think of our society today and how many levels are we being affected by the society that we live in? You know, the advertising is constant. It's non-ending. Back 50 years ago, there was a book came out, A Future Shock, by a man called Alvin Toffler, I believe. And he was talking about the informational overload back then, 50 years ago. Well, and then he read another one called Future Shock. Again, extrapolating how this was not getting any better, it was getting worse. And I heard recently that Charlie Clark, you've heard about him, how he turns what does he turn off every Friday afternoon, Friday evening? What?
Cell phone.
Because and that's his business. But he said he has to take charge, otherwise it's going to take charge of himself and his family. So people are recognizing more and more that the control over this exposure is getting very critical. Now, while the program is, I am the gatekeeper of my health, I make the decisions, but I'm also consciously or unconsciously making decisions for who? Everybody that I come in contact with. When we have a business and we deal with employees and we deal with customers and vendors and so forth, and I can be grumpy, or my wife can be grumpy, and then it can affect the whole day. It can affect our customers. If we respond to their irritations, then it sets up barriers. So really, if my health is going to have an effect on everybody around me, and vice versa. And Thomas Edison said, the doctor of the future will no longer treat the human frame with drugs, but rather will cure and prevent disease with nutrition. And we're not just talking about psychotropics here. We're talking about that whole gamut of chemistry that is being used, whether it's this chemo on one side or vitamins and minerals on the other extreme. Everybody wants to become a chemist, it seems like. Well, I want to introduce you to the doctor of the future. This is a woman in a marketplace in Central Africa. And what does she have? Whoops. Is it okay?
Okay. Yeah.
We'll get it later? Okay. So this woman got her medicine on display. And I thought, when I first saw it, I thought, wow, how that is so neat. Thomas Edison would say, yeah, there she is. That's the doctor of the future. And this is not new. I mean, it's already in the literature. A little break here. My walk with God was obviously going along a long time before I recognized it, but I used to work at the North Pole on oil rigs. And as I mentioned to some, I thought I was going to die with a fistful of money in my pocket, so I decided to quit. And I quit just in time. The crew plane crashed, and of the 34 people on board, only 2 survived. So God truly was involved in my life without me knowing it. There were other influences up there that registered years later, started registering. But I decided I wanted to go on with my education. I had sort of ditched university. I felt it was kind of boring, and decided I wanted to travel around the world. I made it as far as Australia, and then the course has sort of changed. But my mother, of all things, we weren't religious in that sense, but my mother gave me a small pocket Bible before I headed out. I put that in my backpack, and I decided I was going to read that every single day before I stuck my thumb out. And I did that religion. I did that constantly for several years. Every day before I hit the road, I would pull out the Bible and read a bit, and I started getting headaches because it was such heavy reading. I was not used to this kind of involved reading. You know, I was the internal connections are tremendous and makes your brain work. And my thinking started changing. I started off saying, you know, our thoughts. And my thoughts were clearly in this area and really had no interest in the spiritual. I can't really say had an interest in it, but just by reading the Word of God, my thinking slowly began to change. Unconsciously, it started to change. And one of the first things I read, of course, was that God made man, and He breathed into him what? Here's one of the first health lessons in the Bible. God breathed into man what? Breath of life, and the breath of life has what in it? So, air, oxygen, and where does the breath of life go? It went through his nostrils and went where? Lungs. To his lungs, and then the breath of life, the element of life, went into what? The blood. Into the blood, and the Bible says the life is in the blood, and so there's our first indication of a health message in the Bible for me. That God is trying to teach us principles that are very fundamental, but very, very profound. I got that thing farther and farther away from me. And then He did the same with the woman. Now don't get upset with me, women, but God cloned the woman from the man. She was exactly his. There could be no denial that she wasn't equal with him. She was of him. She was his equal complement. They were gene for gene. That's why he could say, you know, she's bone of my bone and so forth, flesh of my flesh. She was identical. It helps me to understand God the Father and the Son. They're identical. If you've seen me, you've seen what? The character. God, it's just such an amazing story. And they walked with their Creator. Can you imagine walking around with no acorns on the ground and no dead leaves? It was perfect. Wow. And just everywhere you turned, utter perfection. Not even a faint hint of decay or death. But I was raised in a world where death was synonymous with whatever beginning there was. Death has always been there, and will always be there. So the Bible really introduced me to different thinking, and one of those thoughts was, I was thinking, how do these animals get along in heaven or on earth with no death? Because the Bible says that death came in through who? One man. And so before that man sinned, there was no death. How did everybody get along? And here's a perfect example of an African lion and a lamb who grew up together. This is not just Photoshop or AI. This is a true picture. I have a picture when they're old and gray as well. I'm not sure if I have it on this slide. Now, the first question that came into my mind, and the first question that comes into most people's mind when you start talking about an alternative diet than what the typical American is used to, one of the first questions is, what? Have you ever heard that question?
Oh, yeah.
I've heard it more than once, and it's a legitimate question because why? Our brains have been cultured to think in a certain way, and so to start thinking a new way it might hurt a bit. But God wants to slowly change our thinking in line with His thinking. So in the Garden of Eden, there was no killing and no eating of other animals. How's it going to be in heaven? It says the wolf will lay down with what? The lamb. And so there isn't going to be that advertising campaign that you must get where you get your protein. So typically, and I put this on in colleges and schools, and I basically will go here. Where do they get their protein? 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 So clearly, from the vegetable kingdom, it can create all kinds of shapes, sizes, and colors, right? Different temperaments, everything different from the same source. So clearly the protein's not the main issue here. Where does he get his protein? Now he is a vegetarian. And can you get protein from bananas? Who wants to arm wrestle this guy? And then the question of where did he get his protein and where do you get your protein? So the typical American, it's advertising, right? It's advertising, changing our thinking or modifying our thinking so that we are cultivated to think in one direction. But clearly all those other animals out there, whatever size or shape they were, could perform very well on a protein diet, that whatever protein they were getting from that vegetable kingdom was more than adequate to keep them healthy and active and able to regenerate themselves. When you see the golden arches, you are probably on the road to the pearly gates. Have you ever read that one? That's from William Castelli. He's the director of the world-famous Framingham Heart Study. And this was reported on NPR way back in '95. Do you think things have changed? Advertising is everything. And each one of us can be an advertiser, can't we? Every one of us can advertise something else. And that's the plan here, that I hope that things will be shared with you that will cause you to ask questions and maybe reevaluate what you're doing or affirm what you're doing. For me, this is an affirmation. I've done it enough times that it just reminds me, okay, this is why you're doing it. We've been through this before. But all that in the Garden of Eden changed by what? Thinking. And the thinking was radically changed on one word. God said, you shall surely, what? Die. And the enemy inserted one word. It changed that whole thing. You shall surely not die. And the thinking, then it called into question God, and then the ripple effect, the domino effect, just continued on. So clearly our thinking, we can go back and see that our thinking has been altered over time. The Bible told me, and at this time I was hitchhiking, as I mentioned, and I had this little Bible, and I came across different verses, and one of them was that there's this broad way, and there's a narrow way. And they are not the same. They don't, but one of them can be an off-ramp, actually, of the other. And so it is. What are we on? And I slept under billboards in big cities, and slept in graveyards out in the country. And I spent maybe 3 months hiking through the Baja Desert. He found him in a desert land, and in the waste howling wilderness he led him about, he instructed him. And I really felt that was my case. I read the Bible every day, and like you mentioned earlier, it's a quiet place here. I didn't have that interruption or competition from traffic or they didn't have smartphones, but I didn't have that competition, so I could really focus on some of these new ideas that I was reading in the Bible. And I've been through some dust storms. Oh Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps. Have you learned that yet? Have we learned it the easy way, the hard way, or we're still learning that? We can't. It's not possible. There's too many variables in this world for us to be able to choose how to get through. Teach me thy way, O Lord, and lead me in a plain path because of mine enemies. So we have these challenges, and I was hitchhiking through Florida, and I just come out of some McDonald's or something, and here was a little tiny. Have you ever seen those little tiny Bibles? They're about yay big, and there's a verse on every page, and they're about that big, about that thick. And I'm walking down the road, and what's this? And I leaned over, and my big heavy backpack, and I picked it up, and I opened it up, and there is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it leads where? Ah. And that stuck with me, that little Bible. I don't know who threw it out, but I picked it up. And it was one more seed in my mind that started germinating and causing me to ask questions. This is a famous painting, The Blind Leading the Blind. It's a Bible verse. What is the actual story? There's a subliminal message in this picture. Can you catch it? Do you see it? It's right in your face. Do you see it? Well, they're all blind. There's the subliminal message. It was written in a time when people were starting to question the church. They're questioning what they're being taught. And the question was, are we really being fed truth, or what are we being fed? People were asking questions in the Reformation. And it doesn't matter today. Everybody needs to what? Ask those questions, right? Nothing has really changed. We still have to ask questions. It's so easily to be led astray. Can the blind lead the blind? Shall they not both fall into the ditch? And Jesus was speaking to who when he said this? He was speaking to his disciples about what? Religious leadership. Be careful. It's not necessarily that they're doing it maliciously or intentionally, but nevertheless the outcome is the same. You can be led astray. So that puts the onus back on who? On me. I have to make those choices, right? Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. That's so handy when you're out in the middle of the desert and it's nighttime and you're trying to figure out which way to go and you've got a little bit of light. But those batteries only last so long. The truth shall set you free. And the New Testament, the very first sermon that Jesus gave was a health message. Did you ever look at it that way? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now that has got to be a paradigm shift for our thinking. Because when I'm poor in spirit, the last thing I feel is like I'm a child of the kingdom. I feel like I'm very far from the kingdom. And here Jesus is saying the very, very opposite. That when we're in that position mentally, we're actually very close to what? The kingdom of heaven. We're just a thought away. And that brings up the idea, how far are we from being saved or being lost? What's the distance between the two? It's one thought. There's only one thought between the two. There's only one thought between here and going back home. One thought. I'm going back home. That's the thought. And it will propel me to get back home. So between here and there, or wherever we want to go, or wherever we've been, really we're here because of one thought that and has been worked on. The thought has been regenerated over and over again, but nevertheless, that one thought is why we are here. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek. That's not the world we live in, is it? How is that possible? Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I lived in west coast of Canada. We were back out in the woods. I cut firewood for a living at that time, and some of the trees were quite big. They might be 6 foot on the butt. They might be 200 foot high. And I was looking for fallen trees to cut for firewood and haul them out, but I came onto this what they call a blowdown on the west coast, where these strange winds come in and they will take down giants. These trees are huge trees, And that wind will come down in there, and it's like a cyclone. The one will start falling, and their roots are all interconnected. And once one goes, there's a fall down. They all start falling down. And I came upon one of these blowdowns. I'd never seen one before. And out of these giant trees laying on the ground, here was a sapling coming up through the middle. And this verse jumped out at me. The meek shall inherit the earth. Here were the winners. All the big players had what? Taken each other out. And who was the new one? This little sapling was coming up amongst all these giants. And he was going to be the king of the forest one day. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. I noticed Charlie Kirk's wife, one of her parting messages was to women. Did you catch that? Did anybody hear that? She said, women, be virtuous. You know how many people were in that auditorium? A lot of people, a lot of women, a lot of single women. Be virtuous. Wow. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Isn't that what we want? To see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they that are persecuted. What? For righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Is, not future, now. Blessed are the poor in spirit, says, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And here's the other verse that says it's a now thing, it's not a future thing. We can have it now. We don't have to put it off. We don't have to postpone it. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted the prophets which were before you. And I don't know what your thinking or position is on Charlie Clark and his ministry, but the fact remains that he has had a large influence on people, and he has galvanized young people and old people. He's challenged them, and I think we can all be challenged. Can we do better? Can we represent God more perfectly? Can we, in such a way that it wins their attraction and doesn't drive them away, right? We don't want to do that. Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. So this is God's business plan. You know God's a business God, right? Jesus said, I must be about my Father's business. So he's saying his Father is a business God, right? And so Jesus was a businessman. We never usually look at him as that, but he was a businessman. What was his business? To save my soul. That was his focus, to save my soul. But we are not just the gatekeepers of our own health, that puts us in a position to be gatekeepers of everybody's health. Nobody impacts my wife so much as me. I know it. And vice versa. And we have a near perfect marriage only because we say we're sorry so many times. We've learned to say sorry. And it helps. It's not perfect in the sense that what God has for us, but it goes a long ways in saying and recognizing that we need help. So, we're talking about health. Is it confusing out there? Which way are you going to go? What's the how do you pick? You ever got lost in this one? So here's SAM, Standard Alternative Medicine. So that's what we're here about, talking about health. You are the gatekeeper of your health, and you've got to pick and choose. Or you're going to let somebody else choose for you, correct? One of the two. And if you give your soul and body and mind into somebody else's care and keeping, well, they have to do what they think is best, what they've been trained. They're going to use what they know and their thinking. But this is a typical rostrum of what you're going to see when your options are in this camp. SAMs, drugs, chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, steroids, antibiotics, psychotropics, vaccinations, and then this never-ending list of more drugs. But what about complementary alternative medicine? You think SAM is complicated. When you get to complementary, it gets even more profound. You have natural food products, deep breathing exercises, meditations, therapies, yoga, qigong, hypnosis, qigong, guided imagery, chiropractic, osteopathic, naturopathic, massage, biofeedback, traditional healers, diet-based therapies, progressive relaxation, homeopathy, and at the bottom list supplements, plus supplements. And you got that stream to think about. So when you put them all together, you know, you have healthcare Babylon. The average person just cannot navigate that. And I wouldn't have known what to do, except, as I mentioned earlier, this doctor, that doctor had a pharmacy of practically any drug he wanted. He gave me this book. This book. If you don't have this book, I brought some other books here. You come up and ask me and I will make sure that you get one of these books. Is there anybody here who does not have Ministry of Healing? Would you like one? Okay, we'll make sure you get one. Did somebody else raise their hand? Okay, we'll make sure that you get one, because that is profound. It's a profound book. And it's simple. But today, you know, when you go out onto that healthcare highway, this is what you're faced with. When you have a minister of the gospel who has to kickstart his prayers in the morning with Zoloft, you know, something's wrong. Something's wrong in that picture. Is it? And I wish my wife was here to tell you one of her stories. Starting off, like, she was on antidepressants, and then she became a Christian. She started becoming a Christian. And one day she said, "God, either you're God, and you remove this from me, or you're not God." And you know, for some people it may take longer. It's not that God isn't working. He maybe wants to do it the roundabout route, but for her, it was that quick. And when I wandered into that mission station, my life started to change. But you'll notice here that while you're going down that healthcare highway, there's always an option. There is My 8 Doctors. Oh, what's this thing here? What? Charcoal therapy. I've never heard of that one. Forget that one. Natural remedies. So no matter where you are on this healthcare highway, you will see off-ramps every once in a while. And you may pass them for a number of times, but one day something's going to click in there and you're going to say, I want to investigate this, hopefully. You were mentioning, Becky, that you've been looking at this. Your situation reminds me of myself. You know, it really does. I just started asking questions. I didn't always get the answers I wanted, but it helped me. Now, Margaret Chan is a former director for the World Health Organization, and she was prophesying years and years ago, this is years ago, that the day of antibiotics was come to an end. She said, in my lifetime, antibiotics are going to come to an end. Global crisis in antibiotics caused by rapidly evolving resistance among microbes responsible for common infections that threaten to turn them into untreatable diseases. Now, she was prophesying this 20 years ago. A post-antibiotic era means, in effect, an end to modern medicine as we know it. Some people are just reluctant to admit it. The things as common as strep throat or a child's scratched knee could once again kill. There's a friend coming tomorrow. He got a scratch on his leg, right here. And I'll show you pictures. So it's not, you don't have to exercise your imagination. For patients infected with some drug-resistant pathogens, mortality has been shown to increase by 50%. So here's a strep throat example. 2017, Kevin Breen, 44, developed an extremely rare strep infection shortly after his son fought off a case of what? Just like she said, the strep throat. The team worked around the clock, minute by minute, for the next several days, trying to keep him alive. Breen's severe case of septic shock, the toxin, notice that word there, what? The toxins. Toxins from the strep organism. Do these microbes produce toxins? Endotoxins? Exotoxins? They do. Well, let me ask you another question. Do these little microorganisms have teeth? Don't answer me. Not yet. I want you to think about that. Do microbes have teeth? He was led to the need to amputate part of his feet and hands, according to this doctor. It is extremely rare. She said then. Oh, I pledge, I'm telling you the truth. This is the new director, WHO. Tedros, COVID-19 has led to an increased use of antibiotics, which ultimately will lead to higher bacterial resistance rates that will impact the burden of disease and deaths during the pandemic and where? Yeah. Right down to 2025. The trends reflect disturbing rates of increases in antimicrobial resistance. Microbe resistance in some common drugs running as high as 93%. Well, it's basically, it's over, right? UN Interagency Report, No Time to Wait, predicted that mortality from drug-resistant infections could increase more than tenfold, causing up to 10 million. That's conservative. That's a very, very conservative estimate. 10 million deaths a year by 2050. We're well on our way. And we've got 25 more years. So those numbers are already coming in. This is basically more the same. Now, change in thinking from Ministry of Healing. This is a chapter entitled To the Physician. So this chapter was directed to physicians, and it says a practice that is laying the foundation of a vast amount of disease and of even more serious evils is the free use of poisonous drugs. People need to be taught that drugs, who's supposed to be teaching this? The doctors. Now, if the doctor's not doing it, now who's going to have to teach it? You and me. We now become the educators. If somebody's not teaching it, when I read that statement, talk about a jolt to my thinking. I thought, what is she talking about? You know, I've done university, I've done chemistry, biochemistry, organic chemistry. What is she talking about? People need to be taught that drugs do not cure disease. It is true that they sometimes afford present relief. And this is because nature, that's my body, has sufficient vital force to expel the poison, the drug, and to correct the conditions that caused the disease. In other words, the body has to work overtime now to get rid of the toxins. What organs in your body get rid of toxins? What? Okay, kidneys, whatever. Skin, your big one, the big liver. So you have all these cleansers going on. So those organs are now working overtime to do what? That they're designed to get toxins out of your body. So if you're adding toxins to your body, then your organs are working overtime trying to do that, and they can run out of steam, and they'll put you on a dialysis unit. What do you think they put in dialysis units to clean dirty blood? Anybody have a guess? The magic word for this weekend is called charcoal. So charcoal is one of the ingredients in all dialysis units or hemoperfusion cartridges. It is true that they sometimes afford present relief. This is because, as I told you, but in most cases the drug only changes the form and location of the disease. Often the effect of the poison seems to be overcome for a time, but the results remain in the system and work great harm at some later period. By the use of poisonous drugs, many bring upon themselves lifelong illness, and many lives are lost that might be saved by the use of natural methods of healing. This is a letter Ellen White wrote to John Harvey Kellogg, in his day a very famous person, Kellogg's Cornflakes, but he also ran a huge hospital system. The medical fraternity, represented to me as Freemasonry with their long, unintelligible names for drugs, which common people, that's me, cannot understand. I took chemistry. I thought, where did they get these words from? Would call the Lord's prescription for Hezekiah quackery. Well, 2025 quackery. Does anybody know what Premarin is? Yep. Do you know where it comes from? Yep. Have you ever dissected the word? Pregnant, mare, urine. Premarin. And it's used for hormone replacement therapy, clinical depression, heart disease, osteoporosis, fertility treatment. That ought to wake you up, right? So, modern medicine. Anybody heard of Coumadin? Rat poison? Okay, do you know where it comes from? It comes from Wisconsin fields. They found it in, there was these cows were dying out in this field. And something was killing them, and so they isolated a chemical in the rotten hay. And they isolated it, concentrated it, and packaged it. And it is out onto the market. See, at that time they had warfarin, or they had strychnine to kill rats. And it was first packaged as warfarin for killing rodents. And the reason was, as my wife says, rats are not the brightest light bulbs on the planet. So with strychnine, they'll eat it and die right there. But with warfarin, what happens to the person or the rat when it eats it? It bleeds to death. So they'll go home, get in their nest, and then they'll die in their sleep from blood. They'll bleed to death. And the rest of the family will say, "Oh, he just had a stroke. I don't know what the cause is, but they don't associate it with the bait." And so it was a bait that worked really well for rodents. They would go home and die. And then it was rebranded as Coumadin, and Eisenhower made it famous. He was one of the first celebrities to use it, and I think he had 28 heart events before he finally died. And that would have been called a preventable adverse event. Here is synthetic Gila monster saliva for type 2 diabetes, implanting embryonic pig insulin cells, type 1 diabetes. Oh, and this one, you've all heard of this one. This is really a 4-letter dirty word. It is FMT, fecal microbiota. Isn't this remarkable? You would be very aware of this. Yeah. And it goes in from one end or the other end. You can insert it, I've been told, from top or bottom, or otherwise. COVID vaccine. This is the AstraZeneca version. The first ingredients is scrapings from the inside of a chimpanzee mouth. And they culture an adenovirus off of that. That's the first ingredient. The first time I learned this idea of living temples, I was hitchhiking in Florida. I was reading my Bible, and this man picked me up. It's an amazing story. And I'll just give you an abbreviated one. He was a brand new Christian. He weighed pushing 400 to 500 pounds. He was a baby Christian. And he witnessed to me. He just kind of smelled the atmosphere I had around my body, and he took some wild guesses that I might be smoking and other things. And he proceeded to tell me that my body was the temple of the Holy Spirit. Well, that was another new idea to me. And he said, the whole world can eat ice cream, but Jack Frost does not eat ice cream. And that has stuck with me. I've told literally thousands upon thousands of people that story, the longest version. And his pastor was the one who told him in a very dramatic way that, Jack, you need to clean up your act. And he took Jack into their sanctuary. I think it was Pentecostal. I know he was Pentecostal. And he took him into his church, and they had stained glass windows and padded pews and velvet everywhere, carpets. And pastor said, Jack, he said, come over here. What do you think about worshiping with us in this place? He said, Pastor, it is heaven on earth. The singing, the fellowship, the word, it just lifts my soul to heaven. And he said, well, Jack, what if you came in here one day and you saw clouds of cigarette smoke in here? What would you think? And Jack said, I wouldn't like it. He said, well, Jack, what if you came in here one day and there were great gobs of fat dripping down off the ceiling, down the stained glass windows, onto the padded pews and the carpeted floor? Jack says, I got the message, Pastor. Now we're all chuckling, but did that pastor love Jack? That was true pastoral love and concern, wasn't it? That man was wealthy. He was a real estate broker. I mean, this guy was not poor. And he risked losing a very, very lucrative addition to his coffers, But he loved that man. Are we willing to risk offending? We don't want to do that on purpose. We don't want to offend somebody, but could we say something that could change their thinking? That pastor affected my life. He affected my life. And I've told that story to thousands and thousands of people. And I don't know how many it's affected, but you can see the power of one, right? The power of one person, one thought can have a ripple effect. We have no idea where it will end up. And we don't have to be intimidated by the truth. I mean, God help us to know when to say and when not to say, right? Know you not that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. We're going to talk about simple herbs a little bit tomorrow afternoon, and we're going to talk about charcoal mostly tomorrow afternoon. If I could give this remedy some outlandish name that no one knew but myself, it would have greater influence on what I wrote to John Harvey Kellogg, because the reality is charcoal, oh come on, it's good for cooking, but that's about as far as we're going to go with that. But the average American is touched directly or indirectly between 12 to 20 times by activated charcoal every single day of the year. From the food we eat, to the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food preparations, just the list goes on and on. We'll talk about that. Now, I worked for this company for a while. I worked with draft horses and their parades, and I saw this when I was a kid, but it really stuck in my mind for all those years. It had an impact on my mind. And it's this little girl lost in this very deep and dark wood, and she doesn't know which way to go. And so while she's trying to figure out which way, and she's fearful, and she's all alone, and she doesn't know what to do, and she looks up and here's this pink cat up in the tree, and Alice says, would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here? That's a logical question, right? If you're on the healthcare Babylon highway, and the cat says, well, that depends a good deal on where you want to get to. Is that not very logical? Yeah. It's extremely logical. It can't be any more clear. Well, when you're fearful and you're under a lot of stress and your grandchild is convulsing in the back seat, you want answers when? You want them now. We don't have time to discuss this. I need to get to a solution now. I don't much care where. Then it doesn't much matter which way you go. Isn't that true? So unless you arm yourself, I can give you some information, you'll read some other information other places, and you'll start to collect this information. But the day comes when you're going to you better be prepared, because emergencies have a way of just showing up when you are not ready. If you haven't had that experience yet, you will. And I had that, when this man, and he'll hopefully be here tomorrow, when he came in, I looked at him and I thought, all I could say was, God, I don't know what to do with this guy. Impress on my mind what I should do. But I've had some amazing teachers along the way. I think back at the doctors that have influenced my life, teaching me, nurses, healthcare professionals, so that when I'm faced with something like this, I'm not without choices. I'm not just blindsided because of better advertising. God's business or man's business of healing. I've already mentioned this one. Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper. Now that's talking about, I would think, dollars and pennies, right? It's talking in that financial area of our life that we have to have. We have to have something to take care of us, and hopefully extra to take care of who? Somebody else. It's not just for me. The blessing of the Lord maketh rich, and he addeth no sorrow with it. No negative side effects. That's a God remedy. No known adverse side effects. The blessing of the Lord maketh rich, and he addeth no sorrow with it. On the other hand, here is an HMO, Health Maintenance Organization, in the Wall Street Journal. We see people as, this is business. This is not a charitable organization. So why are we expecting to be charitable? They're a business venture. They're venture capitalists. We see people as numbers, not patients. It's easier to make a decision, just like Ford. We're a mass production assembly line, and there is no room for the human equation in the bottom line. Profits are king. Why do we expect more? That's their business. How much does it cost to get sick? Well, you get sick and it costs money for your family, then it costs for drugs over the counter, then it costs for doctor visits, and you're well acquainted with that, doctor. Hospital visits are next, then surgery, lost work time. So you add up all that money that you're spending just to get sick. It's not an inexpensive idea. And then after you die, guess what? You still have to pay to get buried. It's cost of getting sick. So, I've mentioned that I've lived and worked in different countries around the world, and what they call developing nations. The term is not correct when you say a third world country. Don't use that phrase if you're over there. Say developing nation. And it's very primitive. And it's primitive. So I asked myself the question when I come back, do you have to be wealthy to be healthy? Now, I've asked Hindus, and I've asked Muslims, animists, Catholics, Protestants, and atheists. And it doesn't seem to matter what. Everybody will just shake their head. They don't believe that God only loves rich people, and that you have to be wealthy to be healthy. They don't believe it. Somehow, something inside them says Research Council, and this is 2013, and I just have not updated my stats, because some of them, they don't like to repeat them. They don't like to publicize them because it disturbs people. But what developed country has the lowest probability of survival to the age of 50? This country. America. Can you believe that? In that study, Institute of Medicine, this is 2013 National Research Council, the lowest probability of survival to age 50, U.S. men came in last. So of the 17 top industrialized nations in the world, we came in last. Women second, heart and lung disease, diabetes, number one, infant mortality in this country, alcohol and so forth. The fourth leading cause of death in America is due to the adverse effects of properly prescribed drugs by doctors and hospitals. Welcome.
Thank
We're
you.
glad to see you.
We made it.
Thank you, thank you. This is Leanne and Mason. They're going to be helping us with our program. So this is Johns Hopkins School of Hygiene and Public Health, reported in the JMA, Journal of American Medical Association, in 2000. Do you think those numbers, do you think that's changed? The number one cause of bankruptcy in America is medical debt. Not in the poor income bracket, but in the upper middle class. That's the number one cause of bankruptcy in this country, medical debt. Again, this is in the American Journal of Medicine, 2009. 2022 life expectancy, Japan 85 years, up from 82. Canada number 16, up from 80 to 82. Cuba, number 45. And who is right behind Cuba? This country. And that's for emphasis.
The last couple years because of the injection.
Notice, yes, that has been dramatic. That has been so dramatic they cannot ignore it. It's sky is falling. But you know, you can see that even in the States it has dropped. This one, at this point, it had already dropped. This is pre-COVID. It had already started coming down. What's happening is what that Dr. Chan said. We're seeing more and more drug resistance. You add it all together, it's amazing that we survive. It truly is. Now, this thing over here on the left is a proton accelerator. It can take up a full acre, it can take up 6 acres, it can take up 20 acres. It's a tube that propels protons down at tremendous speeds and then up fiber optics into a hospital. And then they bombard cancers and they kill them without even opening up the flesh. So pretty amazing technology, right? Have you ever tried to get one of these through customs? Have you ever tried to pack one in your luggage going to Congo? It just ain't going to happen. But who can you take with you? Will he go with you? Will he go with you? Does he have a passport to get into any place in this world through his spirit, right? And you know, New Agers talk about channeling, right? Can we be a channeler for the proton maker? Absolutely, I've seen it happen. I've seen people lay hands on people and they've been healed. They don't have to go this long route of natural remedies. They just lay their hands on them and they recover. That's where we're headed. When was the last time you laid hands on somebody? When was the last time you laid hands on somebody and they were healed? Why? This is out in the wilderness. The Hebrews were in slavery, they're in bondage, and now God wants to set them free. And they get out in the wilderness and they start complaining about their pastors. And so out of the rocks and dens come these snakes, these serpents, and they bite them. And the leader is told to make a brazen serpent, put it up on a cross. And what was to happen if you looked at that? You'd live. Now there were obviously some people who didn't, because it said thousands died. So I can just see myself at some points in my life where I'm not going to look. I refuse to look. Have you ever been stubborn like that? I hope you've never had that, but I've had those experiences where God will tell me something I don't want to. I don't want to. And God is so gracious and so patient with me. I don't know about you, but you know, I look back and I see how many times He's just said, well, you will look. It's just going to take a little bit more. Do we have serpents today, in the 21st century? These are the logos for all the medical associations around the world. What is the one thing in common? Why would they choose a serpent? Is a serpent benign? Notice the Israeli one. This is quite amazing. Here you have a menorah, with a serpent in it. And then you have the American one. It's a stylized 666. They don't do anything by accident. Here's the American Medical Association 666. That's purely intentional. It's not accidental. So it's these things are there subliminally, but more and more God says He's going to let them be exposed. We're going to see them for what they are. So here's our 21st century snakes that we're up against. Who is God that I should let these slaves go free? And that's where we are today with the medical fraternity, unfortunately. And I'll read some quotes by Benjamin Rush and other American founders. What they recognized way back then, what would happen with the medical fraternity if allowed to continue doing what it was doing back then. And we are there. So I was raised with man's science books, and then I was exposed to the Bible and all this opposite thinking, 6 days of work makes more money than 7 days a week. And giving 10% or 90% will actually earn you more than 100%, and on and on. Love your enemies, and so forth. God had a program that had to make my mind think differently. Was I going to believe it or not? There's a book called Pilgrim's Progress. Has anybody read that? Yep. Several of you have. The author also wrote a book called Holy War. And in this Holy War, there's a city named Mansoul. And I never picked up on that, even after I finished reading the book. Man's soul. And in Mansoul, there was all these gates. And they were guarded, but then the people in Mansoul became careless. And the gates were unattended, and in came Diabolus. And the rest of the story, you can guess what happened. But it's built off of a story in the Bible where Jesus talks about healing a possessed man and casting the enemy out. And then he was accused of using what? Satan to cast out this spirit. So then he got into sort of a discussion point, and he used this idea of bondage and a man being set free, tying up the strong man that's occupying or lording it over somebody, tying him up so that this person can be free. When an unclean spirit has gone out of a man, he walks through dry places seeking rest and finds none. Then he said, I will return into my house from whence I came out. And when he has come, he finds it empty, swept, and garnished. Now, the main problem is not that it's swept and garnished. The main problem is what? Then goeth he and taketh with himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. Even so shall it be also unto this wicked generation. So, first the man is liberated by a stronger person from this unclean spirit. And the unclean spirit disappears off into the wilderness. He's kind of off the picture. But back home, the man, it cleans up the house. Or, this is a most amazing story. And he leaves it in perfect condition. Except what? It's empty. That's the problem. And so the spirit comes back, the evil spirit comes back and looks in the window, and before he goes in, because he knows that that strong man, if he's around, will do the same thing to him this time as he did last time. So he looks in, but he doesn't see anybody, and so he thinks, I'm going to go get some friends just in case. And I had rented out a trailer. I actually didn't rent it. I gave this trailer out to some young people, and they were on drugs and so forth, and they trashed it. So it was actually, it had a good ending, but they trashed it. And this spirit goes and gets his friends, comes back, and they trash the building. The problem is, and it's the same way with our Christian experience. I don't know what yours has been like, but I accepted Jesus as my Savior. And there was this honeymoon period where everything seemed to be rosy and going well. But I felt that I was pretty well, I had things under control. But I was empty. I was clean. I had cleaned up my act, but I was empty. And that's what's happened to the Christian church. That we are Christians, we've experienced cleansing, but we're still hanging on to lordship. I really want to run my own show. And if we're all old enough here to know, except for maybe Mason, that we, under our own command, don't do a very good job. We just don't do a good job. And we do a bad job. And we may have to go through this experience. How many times did Mary Magdalene go through this experience? She was healed of how many spirits? 7. The science of phrenology, psychology, and mesmerism are the channel through which Satan, comes more directly to this generation and works with the power which is to characterize his efforts near the close of probation. Now, started off this program about what I suggested was the main cause of disease is what? Our thoughts. So if there's a true mind culture, and there's probably a false mind culture. Satan has come unperceived through these sciences and has poisoned the minds of thousands and led them into infidelity. He is well pleased to have the knowledge of these sciences widespread. It is a plan which he himself has laid that he may gain access to minds and influence them as he pleases. So a little bit back up here. Phrenology is the study of the structure or the shape of the head to make diagnoses for not just mental health, but physical health, character health. And then we have psychology. Does everybody know what that word means? And then we have mesmerism, or it comes in all kinds of forms, all kinds, from acupuncture to hypnosis. There's all kinds of forms of mesmerism. Satan has come out unperceived through these sciences. They are a science. They do work on principles of the body, whether it's zone therapy or acupuncture. All these rely on these modalities, these sciences of the body. There is, however, a form of mind cure that is one of the most effective agencies for evil. Through this so-called science, one mind is brought under the control of another so that the individuality of the weaker is merged in that of the stronger mind. Do they use psychology in advertising? In all advertising? Is there any advertising that they do not use some form of psychology? They have psychologists on their boards. But it's not just advertising for this or that. Is there a pastor that does not go through psychology classes? Is there police that don't go through psychology classes? And the list goes on and on. It's required. And it's influencing their minds, and their minds are going to influence our minds. And they have the sense that they have a stronger mind. This method of cure has been employed by persons who were ignorant of its real nature and tendency and who believed it to be a means of benefit to the sick. But the so-called science is based upon false principles. What's the false principle? It's very simple. I can lift myself by my own bootstraps. I can do it, what? Myself, when I proved it over 1,000 times that I can't do it myself. I'm going to sell you with the idea that you can do it by yourself. And that's the wrong principle. And it's not to say that people don't feel relieved. People feel relieved on some drugs, right? So it's not that there isn't a payoff. But the main principle is it tends to draw us away from the true physician to looking at ourselves. It is not wise to look to ourselves and study our emotions. If we do this, the enemy will present difficulties and temptations that weaken faith and destroy courage. Closely to study our emotions and give way to our feelings is to entertain doubt and entangle ourselves in perplexity. We are to look away from self to Jesus. Now, I don't know how a woman with a 3rd grade formal education came up with that idea. Where did she get that idea? I have no idea. Depending on this is my saying, it probably won't go down in history. Depending on man, it's like having only one leg and leaning on a pointed stick. There you go, emphasis. It is a painful experience that leads where? And nowhere. And when we're convinced that we can depend on ourselves or our faculty, our history, our experience, our spirituality, the time when psychiatrists considered that they could cure the mentally ill is what? When was this said? To the World Psychiatric Association in 1994. The time when psychiatrists considered that they could cure the mentally ill is gone. So what have we been doing for the last 40 years, 35 years? What have we been doing? Marketing. In the future, the mentally ill have to learn to what? Live with their illness. Well, I believe there is a better than that. I believe that God has things that they have never guessed will help.
Isn't that what doctors say for every disease? You're just going to have to live with this.
Expect to be on this for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's that mantra. Well, there's some, obviously, but I can look around, and like I said earlier, I'm grateful that I wandered into that mission, and there was a doctor there that started really tweaking my thinking, and of all books, he decided to give me this one. In 40 years, biological psychiatry has yet to validate a single psychiatric condition diagnosis as an abnormality, a disease, or anything neurological, biological, chemically imbalanced. Have you heard that phrase before? Oh, it's chemically imbalanced. They've never, ever been able to prove that, not once, all these years. Or genetic. Dr. Fred Bauman, child neurologist, fellow of the American Academy of Neurology. Now this organization, I'm not endorsing everything that they believe, but they are the watchdog on the World Psychiatric Association, and they're one of the big things is children, branding children, labeling children. They see it as very problematic, and that statistic that I gave you earlier, this one here is on one of their websites. It's the Church of Scientology. I try and pick my sources very carefully. There's a word called eclectic, so we need to be pickier, we need to be very careful. And the only way I know if I'm close to truth is if I see some similarities between the word and the principles that I've read in this book. If they don't line up, I don't use them. But they have shut down I don't know how many psychiatric hospitals all over the world through influencing politicians. They're extremely powerful, and they have made war with the World Psychiatric Association. Psychotropic drugs, mania, psychosis, hallucinations, depersonalization, heart attacks, strokes, sudden death. Think about suicide or murder. Ideation can double the risk of suicide. 100 million people taking psychiatric drugs while we've gone through this. So there's consequences. Are there options? Pure air? What? How can pure air help my thinking? Can dirty air affect your thinking? I was once, we were invited to put on a series of programs in this large city at a civic center, and it went really well. And I was still very young. And the hospital contacted me and said, would you be willing to come down and give us some classes here in the mental unit? So I went down to the mental unit. I thought, this is not going to go well. I had this sense. And I went in there, and the lead psychiatrist came over like this. He had a cup of Java, trying to control his shakes. I thought, this poor man. He thanked me for what I shared. He thanked me for sharing what I did with a group of people. Just basics, drinking water, looking at your caffeine consumption, just some very simple basics. You don't want to start a fire with a log, right? You want to start with paper, something that's going to catch on fire. And they invited me back, and we had other opportunities through that. I'm very quick to judge. I'm quick to say this isn't going to work, and I've been proved over and over to be wrong. Exercise, proper diet, the use of water, trust in divine power, these are the true remedies. Every person should have a knowledge of nature's remedial agencies and how to apply them. There are many ways of practicing the healing art, but there is only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature. Now, some of you, most of you have probably heard this, but I don't know if Becky, if you've heard this, that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. Pure air and water, cleanliness. That word cleanliness, that was one of the main articles for Napoleon Bonaparte. Did you know that? That was one of his principal, he said, this is one of my principal medicines in my medicine cabinet. Cleanliness. He wanted nothing to do with the doctors and their drugs. He said, you doctors are going to have more to account for in the next life than we generals. What was he talking about? Somebody whose job is to kill people is going to have less to account for in the next life. Cleanliness. And we're going to share a story that it's remarkable what these two women did just by cleaning up this man's house. Made it clean. It was a nice clean house, but there's still some decision making needed to go on there. Who's going to be Lord of that house? So pray when you meet these people. Pray for them, and a firm trust in God. Are remedies for the want of which thousands are dying. Yet these remedies are going out of date because their skillful use requires work that the people do not appreciate. So make sure you come back. You'll see us demonstrate. Leanne's going to help me tomorrow afternoon just to show a couple of them. But actually Sunday afternoon we're going to have you help us demonstrate and practice on each other. Okay? Drugs, side effects. Addictive, drug resistance, we already talked about that. So that's a sad comment. Now, I did live in Nepal for a while, and here is the local ambulance. So everything was either up or it was down. And there was very few flat areas. So this is not bad, actually. It's a little bit of grade here, but there was our mountains here were their footstools. So you come back to America and you think, well, surely we have the resources to be able to do a lot more. But again, PAEs, preventable adverse effects, depending on the year, you have all these statistics that point the fact that properly prescribed drugs are in 2000 were 225,000 deaths, and even before that, they'd run up some other studies that to the tune of $200 billion costs in 1997, 420,000. And then another one study done in 2003, death by medicine, to the tune of 282 billion, and making it the #1 cause of death in this country. Preventable adverse events, PAEs. It used to be called lapse of memory. Then you have nosocomial infections. This is old statistics. 3.5, I don't know how they get 3.5, but 3.5 people die every hour. That's amazing. I mean, you did not have this disease until you walked through this glass chrome door at the entrance of a hospital. And once you got into that hospital, you got a nosocomial infection and you died. So the first, that's the average. So that was the average that came out per hour. Obviously, you don't have a half a person dying, but first autopsy that I attended was a young mother, perfect health, 22 years old, that had a induced labor, a forceps delivery, and she died 24 hours.
Wow.
Hospital infection. That impresses you because when you're leaving there's a saying, God help me accept. You ever heard that expression? Boy, I thought what a place to put that, as in a morgue as you come out from an autopsy. So here's my 8 doctors. I'll introduce them more fully tomorrow to you. I'm going to move along here. 8:30. When you're in India, you talk about polluted water and all the people dying from diarrhea. Here in America, do we have polluted water? We don't think of it as polluted water, but it is polluted water. And we have all kinds of flavors and bottles and colors, and it's all marketing, and our thinking is what? Our thinking has been changed, and we don't see it the way it is. So heredity, I even heard it already here. I think it was when we were talking, in the house, something was said about heredity. And it's not heredity that kills us, but it's the lifestyle. So my father, it runs in my father's family, or it runs in my mother's family, and really it's what we did with that lifestyle. Did we implement it, or did we change lanes? When we get off on the off ramp, and has our life taken a change? Sister Juanita, when you think of New York City, I mean, all those people. That was an amazing ministry. I was a brand new Christian when I learned about the van ministry in New York City. I thought it was amazing. I wanted to go, but I was occupied at another place. I went to New York. I was at Peekskill for a while with Country Life, but not very long. I moved on to different places. So do we build a fence around the cliff, or do we provide an ambulance down in the valley?
We provide a rope.
We put stones on our bedroom walls, right? So in India, most of the people relieve themselves outside. Temples or toilets. So Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, said toilets first. I mean, he's Orthodox Hindu. He's high caste Hindu. And this man said what? Toilets first, temples later. That he's still in. So it's I don't know how. I don't know how could ever possibly achieve that, but it's just a mental thing. You see it so many places. Here's some, this is a natural remedy, right? You all recognize that? And this is a natural remedy. Did you know this is the most favorite medicine of choice for Alexander the Great? What about this one? It's in spacesuits. It's in dialysis machines. It's used for acute psychotic mania. This is a prison in Uganda, Central Africa. Jesus anointed the eyes of the blind man. Go wash in the pool of Siloam. So it was a double remedy, a poultice, and then some hydrotherapy. The cure could be wrought only by the power. Is it a powerful, natural remedy? It is. I'm so glad my mother prayed for me. I remember my mother weeping over me after beating me and praying for me. And she would say, I did not beat you, but she disciplined me. And I know she loved me. And she did what she could in a home that my dad did not want a Bible, but she prayed for me. I saw that the reason why God did not hear the prayers of his servants for the sick among us more fully was that he could not be glorified in so doing while they were violating the laws of health. So he wants us to what? Cooperate with him. He wants us to fall in line with his thinking, and then he can bless us more quickly, more fully. God will not miraculously save them from the consequences of their indulgence. God will not work a miracle to keep those from sickness who have no care for themselves, but are continually violating the laws of health and make no efforts to prevent disease. Be assured that God will not interpose to save health and life which is so recklessly perilled. And that's from a book called Counsels on Diet and Foods, again by the same author. Trust. Is that a powerful remedy? You trusted us to put you in those chairs. I heard you say it. Can we put our trust in a God that can carry the universe? He won't drop us. We may stumble and fall accidentally, but He is not going to drop us. Now, you may recall this event, but the Bible says that really when we look at ourselves, what do we see? If we want to see the truth, this is what God sees. This is how He sees us. But He sees beyond the outside, doesn't He? Thank God He sees beyond the outside, and He sees what could be. Filthy rags can be actually become righteousness rags.